Stories influence, teach, and inspire us. But what about the storytellers who create them? Uncorking a Story profiles storytellers to uncover how their background and life experiences influence the stories they create. We learn what motivates them, their path to success, and what fuels them to keep creating. It all starts by asking one simple question: where does your story begin? Welcome to Uncorking a Story. Now here's your host, Mike Carlin.
So hello and welcome to Uncorking a Story. I'm your host, Mike Carlin, and today I'm excited to introduce you to May Cobb. May earned her MA in literature from San Francisco State University, and her essays and interviews have appeared in the Washington Post, the Rumpus, Edible Austin, which sounds like a marijuana thing, but maybe we'll talk more about that, and Austin Monthly. May joins me today to talk about her latest novel, My Summer Darlings, which has been called a potent cocktail of desire and deceit. That is a great endorsement, I think. It makes me want to read it anyway. May, welcome to Uncorking a Story.
Thanks so much for having me, Mike. I'm so honored to be here.
And I'm honored to have you here. And I'm going to ask you the same question I ask everybody to begin, which is, May, where does your story as an author begin?
Yes, it begins way back in about the year 1995. And I was a college kid at the University of Texas taking a class in jazz appreciation. To make a very long story short, one day the professor puts on this song. And it was so haunting and compelling to me that I raced to the record store afterwards and I bought the man's music. His name's Rahsaan Roland Kirk. And he was a jazz musician. He was blind from the age 2 on from an accident, but he taught himself to play 3 saxophones at the same time to beautiful effect. And I became obsessed with his story. And he died on my 4th birthday, so I never got to meet him, but I kind of dropped everything and traveled around the country trying to speak to as many people that were still alive that knew him. That's really what set me on the path, was just this burning need to get this man's story out there. And I'm still working on that book 25 years later, which is ridiculous, but I'm hoping to finish it in the new year.
I mean, there's so many things I like about that story. One, of course, is how you just let your curiosity kind of fuel this. And I think authors, we're nothing if not curious. You kind of have to be. You have to have a natural curiosity about people to take the time to write stories. But before I pontificate on that anymore, what I really love about that story is the fact that you went to a record store, after class, and I, you're probably around the same age. I used to live in record stores. I mean, I remember on the weekends, just that's what I would do. I would go to a bookstore and hang out and sift through books. And I'd go to record stores and talk to whoever worked there about new releases, bands, stuff like that. And that is something my kids, God bless them. I have 3 20-year-olds at home. They'll never have that experience, of kind of sifting through the stacks and looking at albums or tapes or CDs or anything.
Yes, it was a real magical thing, right, of discovery, because, there was the Billboard charts and stuff like that, but there was so much you could find that, no one's ever heard of or that you've never heard of. I miss that too.
Yeah, I mean, I would lose hours of time. So after graduating college, after you said University of Texas, what was your career? What did you do? What did you do when you grew up?
I kind of bounced around a bunch of odd jobs. I did go get like my graduate degree in literature, but then I moved to Hollywood, and my dear friend got me a job as a personal assistant. So I did that for a couple of years for a director and actress husband-wife combo. That was fabulous. And then I came back to Austin because I really did want to, kind of hunker down and write. And Austin's got such a great music scene. But yeah, really just, odd jobs to pay the bills while trying to pursue the dream, and had a kid along the way, married the boy next door. That kind of stuff happens.
I imagine your time as a personal assistant in Hollywood for that husband-wife actor-director combo plate, that must be some fertile ground for some storytelling.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that, because I'm starting to think about the next thriller I'm going to write, and it's going to be loosely based on that time. except
Very
the
cool.
people in the novel will be a lot more evil. My people were so wonderful and lovely, but yeah, it was interesting to be dropped in that world.
Yeah, it's a different world. I spent a little bit of time in Southern California, trying to live there, and doing what people do, and it's a different atmosphere. Certainly very different from my frame of reference, which is the East Coast, the Northeast.
So different, yes.
Well, tell me about writing your first novel. I imagine, because we will talk about My Summer Darlings, I promise. But I'm curious, what are some of the big lessons you learned, when penning your first novel?
First one is that you can write a novel in a year in stolen moments. So 15 minutes, grab it, write something. 30 minutes, grab it, write something. My son was 3 then, and it was he's on the autism spectrum, and it was a pretty challenging time in our lives. But if my husband was giving him a bath or whatever, I would just sit down and force myself to write. And I think as long as you keep the story in your subconscious, even if you can't go on a writer's retreat or spend 5 hours a day, like, it will add up if you just pick away at it. And I was able to finish that novel in a year, much to my surprise. So yeah, I think that's the big thing. I think there's a myth that you do have to have all these bottomless hours, but those are actually the enemy to me. I find myself less productive when I have all day. I just stay on social media like a fool. So
Yeah, I love that notion of stolen moments, because I think there's this notion of writers having to lock themselves in a room for 12, 14, 18 hours at a time, and drinking nothing but coffee and some kind of stimulant to keep them up. But you can do it with stolen moments. I love that notion.
thanks. Yeah, it's just true. And as a parent, like, that, sometimes that's all you have.
I have to ask, because I'm staring at a picture over your left shoulder, and if I'm not mistaken, that's Link from Legend of Zelda, is it not?
Yay! You're the only person that's ever noticed that. I'm so impressed.
I have a tendency to do these things, which is why I like to think my interviews are a lot different than everyone else's. But what's the backstory to having Link on your wall?
So my best friend and I were obsessed with Zelda growing up. Like, elbows shiny from being on the carpet, like, all summer long. And when I was writing The Hunting Wives, my second novel, she flew in from LA and she brought this to me, and it says, "It's dangerous to go alone, take this." So it's sort of like, and she's my first reader and responder. So it was kind of having her, like, in the room with me trying to write.
I lost probably an entire summer playing that video game on Nintendo. Me and my friend Nick, because if you remember, it came with a big map, and you needed the map. You needed the map to find out, where you'd place the bombs. And we had like a little formula. We had a little ruler, because wherever the bomb was on the map, you needed to like go over a few inches. It wasn't like perfect. So we literally spent, I don't know how many months trying to beat that game. And then when you beat the game, it flips and you have to start all over again in another adventure.
Yes.
Which,
Yes, hours. It was the best, like, digital nanny my mother could have ever come up with, because same for us. We had all these charts and notes and graphs and whatnot.
yeah, no, that's so funny. Look at that. Legend of Zelda. Who knew we were going to talk about Legend of Zelda? I certainly didn't before that. Well, what can you tell me about My Summer Darlings? I know that is your latest release. And I know, as I teased before, a potent cocktail of desire and deceit. But tell me, what can you tell me about the book?
Yeah, so it's basically centers around 3 lifelong best friends, and it's set over the course of a scorching summer in Texas. It's in a small little town up in East Texas, which is like this sort of heavily forested, eerie area, but sort of a cool area because it's got a lot of oil money, so there's wealth. So basically, it's Big Little Lies, but maybe a little bitchier, and it's in Texas, so there's more booze and crazy women, and a handsome stranger moves into town, and the 3 of them become obsessed with him. And it's sort of I was inspired by the movie The Witches of Eastwick.
Cher. Was it Cher, Bette Midler?
Cher, No, it was Susan Sarandon
Okay.
and Michelle Pfeiffer.
Got
And
it.
then,
Got it. Got it. Yeah, that brings me. Oh, Jack Nicholson was in that too, wasn't he not?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And I loved that whole like friendship getting tested by a man and what really is his story, and obsession and adults behaving badly. So yeah, and it opens with a woman dying in the forest, but you don't know which one of the characters it is. So that's the suspense element.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, I know you can't give away too much about it because obviously you don't want to spoil anything, but that definitely sounds like a juicy summer read.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I hope it'll, get into the hands of readers. Last week it was really cool. No, it was week before last. It was actually on the Today Show. The great author John Searles picked it as the summer, thriller pick for the Today Show. So I was like, what? Because I found out literally the night before it aired.
Right. Well, I think Jenna Bush does a lot of the books on the Today Show, and if look at you, a Texas girl, and you're a Texas woman, and there's a little connection. Maybe you should see if you can get on Jenna's calendar. Who knows?
That would be great.
Well, I always like to get to know my authors a little bit more, and one way I like to do that is through pop culture. So I'm curious, May, when you were a kid, I know what some of your favorite video games were because Legend of Zelda was on there, but what were some of your favorite TV shows when you were growing up?
Gosh, TV shows. I mean, when I was really little, like The Loveboat and Fantasy Island. I mean, TV was so limited those days, right?
It was limited. It was simple. I love both of those shows. I started rewatching Loveboat during the pandemic.
Oh, wow.
And I think you might question if it holds up.
Yeah.
It's definitely cheesy, but a nice walk down memory lane.
Okay.
It's
back in the day. I might have to rewatch it.
Oh yeah, it's out there. It's on like Me TV or whatever that station is known as now, maybe Freeform, but it's out there. Dr. Bricker, wannabe ladies man. I think he had a couple of Me Too moments in that show. I'm not gonna lie.
Just a couple, yeah.
We when I was a kid growing up in South Florida, me, my twin brother Jimmy, our friend Mario, his brother Armando, and their cousin Christine used to play Loveboat. So, Mario, actually, let me ask you this. If we were playing Loveboat, what character do you think I would be in Loveboat?
Gosh, the captain.
I wish. No, Mario had to be the captain, just like he had to be Luke Skywalker when we play Star Wars. He had to be the star. My brother was the doctor. I was Gopher.
Oh, wow.
Fred Granby, I think was the actor. Wound up being a senator in Iowa, I think. But yeah, I was Gopher. So there you go. You'd be Julie McCoy without a doubt.
Thank you.
Right? Or Vicky, but you don't want to be Vicky because she was kind of whiny.
Yes, she was very whiny. Yeah.
She was kind of whiny.
You're making me want to go back and watch it. I want to watch that and also Little House on the Prairie because I loved that too, but I don't know that really holds up at all.
Yeah, I think it might. It's kind of a timeless story. And Michael Landon playing a fiddle while smoking a pipe is... There's no better way to end an episode than Paul playing the fiddle in the kitchen. That's what I like to say anyway. How about kind of pivoting from TV to music? I know you're digging some jazz back in the college days, but what kind of music were you listening to when you were growing up?
I mean, I really like, break dancing was a thing in the 4th grade. So the early rap was really big for me. And
who like Houdini and Sugar Hill Gang, or like
even like I wasn't that cool. It was more like like the soundtrack from Breakin'.
Oh my gosh, Breakin'. Yeah. With Ozone and Turbo.
Yeah.
You didn't know what you were getting involved in when you signed up for this interview.
I didn't think we'd be talking about Breakin'. I love it.
It happens. Oh, I love that movie, Breakin'. And then there was Breakin' 2, Electric Boogaloo.
Exactly.
Exactly. Not a terrible sequel.
Not terrible at all. And I loved Michael Jackson. And then later I really got into like U2 and then like the new wave music, like New Order, Duran Duran, Depeche Mode, that kind of stuff, because it was cool in high school.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, you too. To this day, one of my favorite bands. Probably the band I've seen most live out of all the concerts I've been to.
Me too. Yeah.
At least 10 shows.
Oh wow.
Such a great. I saw it 3 times in one summer. I just during the Octung Baby years.
Yeah.
When I was kind of really coming into my own. But
Yeah.
very cool. Yeah. How about this? Kind of transitioning to writing, of course. In what ways, if any, do you consider writing to be therapeutic for you?
I think as a person that went through the pandemic, it was an escape hatch from the awful reality. So that's therapeutic in and of itself. And I think just even when that big world event's not happening, it's a nice escape from reality. I really like having a story in my mind going that I can dip into and think about, and not think about bills and other things and life. So yeah.
You can create that world where the pandemic doesn't exist, and escape into it. I feel the same way. I finished one novel and wrote another during the pandemic, and
yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, and it's just a great way of because we couldn't do much. You're filled with emotion, but you can channel that into something, creative, and you can kind of deal with your anxiety about the world that way. And I just love kind of that aspect of writing, is kind of creating the world havoc, because we have so little control over our own lives. For the most part, we certainly had no control over the pandemic and lockdowns. But we have complete control over these worlds that we create, that hopefully our readers appreciate. I'm sure yours do. I feel the same way, but a great way to kind of get through the pandemic.
Yes, for sure. I can't believe you wrote 2. That's amazing.
I finished one. I had finished one in the very early part, and then I started another, which I probably wouldn't have done had it not been for the pandemic.
Yeah, great though.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Better than baking the sourdough bread, which if you did that, power to you. But I was just always like, I can't even go there, guys. Really?
We had, my wife's a baker. We had more deliveries from King Arthur Flour coming to our house during that period of time. I can't even look at sourdough bread anymore. Or she got into making cakes from scratch, and I was always a box, Duncan Hines guy, and yeah, they really are better made from scratch. But now I can't look at cake anymore.
It's like, I can't look at dried beans anymore, or the staples. I'm like, if it happens again, I don't know what I'll eat, but I can't eat that anymore.
No, definitely not. Moving on to number 4. How do you feel when you're staring at a blank sheet of paper or a computer screen, and your goal is to write something, the page is blank in front of you? What emotions do you experience?
Definitely fear and stage fright, and also imposter syndrome. Those are the biggest ones.
Imposter syndrome it's just one of those things. I talk to authors who have been New York Times bestsellers, USA Today bestsellers, have written 40 plus books, but they say the same thing. Imposter syndrome is like a real thing. I mean, I personally feel it as well, but how does it manifest itself in your life?
I can just drag my feet in the beginning of a draft and tell myself that, okay, the world's about to find out that I really don't know what I'm doing, that I've had a little bit of luck, and now the gig is up. And then I quickly remind myself that there's bills to pay, and childcare is about to be done for the day, and I've got to get my butt to work. So I'm pretty good at getting, like, I don't let it rule anything, but it's definitely there. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's good that you have ways of getting over it, and those ways sound very practical. Thinking back to your first book, what lesson about writing or publishing do you feel like you learned the hard way?
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. So my first novel, I had 3 agents kind of fighting over it, and 2 of them said this is the kind of book that's going to go to auction. And I guess the lesson I learned the hard way is that no, that's not going to happen with this one at all. In fact, I think it went out, it turned into like a, 4 or 5 month submission. And out of 33 publishers it went to, I think the 32nd said yes. And we never heard back from the 33rd.
Wow.
So it wasn't some starry-eyed, rise to stardom that some debuts have by any means. It was, wow, that barely happens. And yeah, and it wasn't what sort of those first agents told me might happen, which I know you can't really ever predict that, but yeah, that was crazy.
I think the big wow for me there is a debut novel having 3 agents fight over it. I mean, we shouldn't gloss over that, because that's a pretty big win right there.
Thank you. It was like a really heady week, and then it was like, bam, reality.
Well, as they say, reality bites sometimes.
Yeah.
Also a great 90s movie with a very good soundtrack.
Yeah.
And speaking about the 90s, if we can go back to 95, to the young May hanging out at the record store, buying that jazz album. And if you could whisper some words into her ear, some words of advice into her ear, what kind of words of advice would you give your younger self?
Trust your instincts. They're right.
No?
Don't doubt yourself. You're on the right path, and it's going to take a while to get there, but you will. So stop torturing yourself. You're doing what you're supposed to do.
Do you feel like you were torturing yourself back then?
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's like you step outside of your house and everyone's like, oh, you can't be a writer. It's not a good career choice. So it's, it's hard not to internalize that, that way of thinking.
Yeah. Well, the book is My Summer Darlings. The author is May Cobb. May, any social media or websites you want to share with listeners of Uncorking a Story?
Yeah, my website just got a fresh remodel, and it's www.maycobb.com. And then I'm on Instagram probably the most, and it's at May_Cobb, MAY_COBB.
Very good. I will put all that in the show notes for everybody. You can just look it up in the show notes. So you don't have to worry about writing it down, listeners. It'll be there for you when you need it. So, May, this has been a very fun conversation, and I wish you all the best with the new book.
Thank you, Mike. And now I've got to go watch The Loveboat.
Thanks for listening to Uncorking a Story. If you'd like more information about today's guest or to find out more about Mike, go to uncorkingastory.com. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review us at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Tune in every week to hear Mike Carlin uncork a new story.